Hey, Rod, what's going on?
Super Bowl.
Yes, Super Bowl Sunday. It's been a couple weeks since you and I have chatted, and lots of stuff happened after that conference, after the NFC title loss there. And we'll get into that, but we're of course going to talk about the Super Bowl first and foremost, and got a good game. There have been some, I would say, average at best games in the most recent past. Like last year's game, there were good moments and it was close, but like I don't think the quality of the play reached what we saw today.
It was
Um,
ultimately forgettable, in my opinion.
yeah, for sure. You know, the Rams won, and shout out to Brad on Thompson to Clark, who's a Rams fan. You know, he celebrated and he had to deal with what they went through this year. But yeah, so let's get into the game because it was meaningful. You saw great play. You saw two great quarterbacks go head to head, go at it. But before that, I just wanted to mention one thing, which is we have a Discord for BSPN. All the local teams have channels. I even threw a Raiders channel up there just in case there's some A's Raiders crossover there.
Mm-hmm.
Vegas, they're Bay Area adjacent, I guess.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to create some community. With me not being able to use Facebook, it opened up my eyes to Discord, and I was like, wow, this is really the tool that I should have been using all along because it does a lot of the things that I really wanted to do. So we have a Discord. Send me an email if you want in on the Discord. We're kind of starting slow. We're keeping it with just a few people right now as we test things out. But gg@bspnmedia.com, and we'll shoot you over an invite and get you in there. Rod just joined today, so he's checking things out. And the main thing with the communities that I personally run is I literally have two rules: no hate speak, no trolling. And I think that kind of covers the gamut of the stuff online that I don't like. And ultimately, I let people act like adults and we talk things out if we have any issues. And that's just how we roll. So it should be a really fun time. But yeah, gg@bspnmedia.com. All right. So let's talk about this game. I thought it was high level offense. Defense didn't really have a chance on either side today, which is interesting because of the Philadelphia Eagles pass rush. And one of the guys that I was talking to today, who's a Chiefs fan, he said that he didn't think Mahomes was going to have problem with it because the way that they were going to attack the Eagles was to get the ball out quick. And so I went and I looked at Pat Mahomes' sack totals of the year. And I was like, this guy almost got sacked 30 times. So it's not like he didn't get sacked at all. But then I thought, some of that is probably him scrambling, trying to get yards for the team, trying to open things up and maybe getting, losing like a yard or two. But man, was he right? Mahomes got hit once, I think, that I saw in the pocket. And he scrambled and ultimately hurt his ankle again on another one. But like that was it. He had like a 30-yard run late in the fourth there. That was just like, how did they take his foot off and they put like a brand new foot on at halftime? I don't understand how that works. But man, ultimately, the best player on the field made the biggest plays in the game to turn it. And that's why you pay those quarterbacks for those performances. I thought Mahomes in a game where you wouldn't consider it to be his best game by far, he just delivered in the end. And I was just like, yep, that's the guy that I remember watching beat us up in the middle of the season there. That's the guy. He's the guy.
Well, I'll say two things. One, Pat Mahomes, if he plays like he plays today, he's pretty much unstoppable. But he will go through streaks where he won't just take what's given to him, and he holds the ball and tries to force it downfield, and that's where he gets in trouble. But if he is willing to just dink and dunk and, for lack of a better word, game manage rather than, be Jordan, he's hard to stop. And also, this game, in my opinion, was a tale of two halves. Mm-hmm. Philly played just the way they had to play to win this game. the Chiefs had the ball for like 8 minutes in the first half. If in Philly, if they ball controlled them and kept Pat Mahomes, the best way to beat Pat Mahomes is to keep him on the sideline.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what they did. And something happened during the Rihanna performance.
Got inspired.
There and figured out how the hell to control both lines of scrimmage, basically. And that was the game. The Eagles' pass rush was, like you outlined, was basically non-existent in the second half. And the Chiefs, they did, they were able to get things done and control the Eagles' offensive line. And the coming out the first drive was the first 3 and out of the game for them. And it was like they were kind of off to the races on both sides. And I think they scored on like 3 of their 4 offensive drives in the second half. I mean, it was just a masterclass offensively for the Chiefs. And the Eagles, I mean, outside of Mahomes, not Mahomes, of Hurts, putting the ball on the ground in the first half, I mean, there's not really much that you could really point to and say, they did wrong offensively. Really?
He had the 1 3 and out was in the third quarter, I think.
Yeah. And I mean,
it was really the difference of the game.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and again, to me, I was, I guess you could go that way. You could go, Philly offense. I went more Kansas City defense on that 3 and out.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I guess it just depends on how you look at it. But I think my overall takeaway is that it was a pretty well played game. All around. I can't remember, and again, I don't like being prisoner of the moment guy.
Yeah.
But it's that this is one of the best, back and forth kind of Super Bowls that I can remember, at least for sure in the last, several years, I thought.
I think the close one was when the Pats came back to beat the Falcons. I think that actually even went into overtime, didn't it?
Yeah, that was another one that was really kind of back and forth, because the Falcons, dominated pretty much the first half.
Yeah.
And then the Patriots did what they did. So yeah, I think that but damn, you realize that, that's pre-Kyle, so that we're talking about that's 6 years ago now.
Yeah, that's like a
long time ago.
1 year BK before Kyle.
Yeah.
So there were a couple of, I think, I sort of look at the Super Bowl and I try to look at it through the lens of like the new fan or the fan who only watches the Super Bowl. And, I imagine any Super Bowl party you were with, you probably were watching it with some folks who don't watch week in and week out. And I was trying to understand, like, man, can you imagine a casual fan watching football and understanding what a catch was in this game? Because there were 2 that we had to go to replay to sort of determine what was going on and if it was a catch. And, shout out to, Greg Olsen. I think he's pretty good, especially this is really his like first big year. He's a receiver, so he needs to tell me, like, he needs to tell me exactly why this is a catch and this wasn't. And the play that I'm thinking of was the Goddard catch. And like, it's clear that Goddard kind of, he catches it and then he kind of juggles it. And then as he's going out, he gets possession. And maybe his pinky toe was dragging right before it lifted off. I think that was the thing. But man, if you're a casual football fan, trying to figure out what some of these rules are is kind of crazy. There were 2 things I thought. The field, what's going on with that field? These guys are slipping and sliding all over the place. If it's raining, you sort of understand, like, okay, I get it. Like, that's just, nature telling us, hey, this is what it's going to be today. But the reason why you have the game in Arizona is so you don't have to worry about the weather. And that field played like it had rained for about 2.5 hours right before. I didn't really understand that. They were trying to say something about the turf and, it's a new turf, but they've been like putting it together for the last 2 years. And here we go, like the biggest game. Whoever put that turf in, they need to be fired because it was terrible. Like I thought these guys were going to get hurt.
Well, but the thing of it is that is apparently when the last time Philly played there, they complained about it being super soft. So whoever the NFL powers that be let their guy come in and oversee the field this week, and whatever their normal protocol was apparently was scuttled, and with the effort of trying to get it to be harder than it was. And so I don't know how any of that works. I know that their field is kind of like the Raiders field where it's turf, and they sit it outside and move it back in and do all of that kind of jazz. So it is supposed to be a grass field, but it really plays odd. it's an odd track. And that you would expect it, not if they wanted it harder, you would expect it that would the slipping and stuff wouldn't have been an issue. So I'm not a horticulturalist, so I don't know how any of that works. But yeah, it was for something that it seemed like they put a lot of effort into. It wasn't just kind of haphazardly done. It still ended up not working out, the way anybody would have hoped. So I don't know. I still think that whatever that is better than being on artificial turf, though.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. It's just when one of the stars of the game has a high ankle sprain, you're throwing this guy out there in the biggest game of the season, and guys are slipping and sliding all over. That just sounds, this is bad, right? It's just, man, whatever.
Yeah, you would think, and I know it's perfection is never gonna, it's never gonna be that, but this is, a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yeah.
And I would think that in it, as much as you can, those type of things should be neutralized. You would throw as many resources as possible to make sure as best you can that the playing surface is as uniform as possible, throughout the league. I think there should be mandated turf throughout, field turf throughout the league. The league should, mandate that everybody throw into a pot, and everybody has to pay to make sure that everybody has grass fields. That, it's a safety issue more so than anything else. And again, if there is we're talking about gambling, there's a lot of TV money, everything that you can do to eliminate as many variables as you can, you need to be doing that. And if it takes, I don't know how many millions of dollars I would take, but hell, I'm generous with anybody else's money. Spend that,
yeah, exactly.
Spend those millions of dollars to make that. It just seems like that would be money well spent if you could get it dialed in where, we aren't talking about the field at any point. If you can, whatever money you invest in making sure that we're not talking about the field and we're not talking about the referees, to me is money well spent.
Yeah, absolutely. Shelvin, our buddy Shelvin, who's in the chat, he said that it wasn't like that in the regular season, and he thinks it was all the paint and stuff. I don't know. I don't know. I didn't follow the Cardinals outside of when we played them. Yeah. So
who would care about them at all this season? But yeah, that doesn't seem like the most ridiculous explanation in the world. I mean, because it was clearly there was a lot of emblems and paint going on for sure.
By the way, Shelvin, you need to get in the Discord. We need to get Shelvin in there. We need to get Rick in there. Robert's already in there.
And I saw Robert with his comment was good that, they did take a while. Now, a lot of people will say that Levi is one of the best fields in the league, but in the early years, it was a work in progress.
Yeah.
Getting that dialed in.
All right. So the other play, when you're talking casual fans, biggest audience of the year, they're talking, maybe the biggest audience ever for Super Bowl when you add in, all the different ways you can watch. The play at the end of the game, that was called defensive pass interference. And that is what Eagles fans are hanging on to life for right now, that play was incorrectly called, except the defensive back to the press said that he did in fact hold. So unfortunately for the Eagles fans, they cannot hold on to that anymore.
That's why I didn't understand what G-Reg was talking about on that play when, it was clearly a foul. We can't be now talking about letting them play and not calling obvious pass interference because of when it occurred in the game. Obviously that was a very important call, but he grabbed him. Clearly he grabbed him.
And why is it, what the thing about it is, why does he grab him? He grabs him because he's about to get beat for a touchdown. That's why he grabs him. And so, right. Look, being on the cusp, your team is there. You're desperately trying to win that game. I don't know what the percent, they run those percentages of the possibility of winning or whatever. I imagine it was very high for Kansas City at that point. But I get it. You're trying to hold on to something that sort of makes sense, gives you a reason why your team lost. That isn't that the other team is better. But, man, he's holding so that he doesn't get beat. And that play was created for that reason.
Just that.
Yes, exactly. So I get it. Eagles fans, that we're with you. Niners fans were, doing the whole thing about if Brock Purdy's elbow didn't get hurt, 2 weeks ago, but that's just the game. The
thing of it is
the outcome.
Is two things. One, that is not, I don't know what the NFL equivalent of the NBA touch foul is, but that wasn't it. And two, when I was talking to somebody just online about that, the only ifs I do in my fandom is if we had scored more points or if we had held them to fewer points. All the rest of it, I don't traffic in the excuse game.
Yeah.
You got your ass kicked. He got beat on that play. And I thought they were very smart there at the end not to take the touchdown. That was brilliant. It stunk for me because I had the Eagles minus the 1.5. So I would have loved them to get the ball back with a minute and try to do something. But hey, that was a smart play to not take the touchdown, run the clock, and just take the field goal. That was smart football. But in that play, just like the play 2 weeks ago with Pat getting pushed in the back, that decided the game, and that's football. I know we don't like that. We don't like to feel like the refs are deciding the game, but ultimately the ref didn't decide the game. Those two players, the two defenders, decided the game because they fouled. Yeah. So I'm never gonna be so, because then we're complaining, the Chiefs fans are complaining we're not calling stuff. So so either way, somebody's gonna be complaining at the end. Either way, so buck up, Eagles fans.
If there is a fan base who very much understands the frustration of getting there, we go back to 2013, being so close and Harbaugh and company deciding to throw the ball multiple times when we're trying to get in the end zone. Then fast forward,
not trusting Cap to just get the play off. That timeout that we called where Frank walks into the end zone, Cap gets it off. He gets the play off, but that's neither here nor there. And then why is Crabtree our number one receiver? Anyway, I mean, let's not re-adjudicate all of that.
right before the pandemic, Jimmy G misses a deep shot, and they ultimately lose. Kind of similarly here, we're just, we get to see Mahomes just take over the game, and then the last 2 years we lose the NFC title game. So, like, we get it. Like, we're kind of there with you, Eagles fans, and like Rod said, you just deal with it. And, I think the other thing about it for Eagles fans is they also lost the World Series, or they didn't. They also lost in the World Series. So that's like back to back, like daggers. Well, maybe the Sixers have something to say about that. Maybe they can get there.
Well, let me say, as an A's fan, my heart weeps for you and your World Series loss. Us and our 100 losses. we had 100 losses. So I'm well acquainted with losses.
Okay, so
when it comes to baseball,
as an A's fan, and we don't talk A's. I've looked for some folks to possibly do an A's podcast. It hasn't happened yet for this network.
I could do one with a bag over my head.
But if you as an A's fan, this fight, Oakland versus Vegas, like, what's going to happen here, do you think?
Oakland does not have the money to build a stadium. Rightfully so. We're not going to, number one, I don't believe that in 2023, where the hell am I at 2 years ago? 2023, that anybody should be putting up any municipal money for any stadium. Period. It just shouldn't happen, because all of these leagues have plenty of money to personally finance any stadium. So Oakland just simply has, number one, doesn't have the money to do that, and two, has much greater needs than rebuilding stadiums or financing, private businesses' stadiums. They, Vegas just, and I would love to have a professional team. I would hate to see a day when Oakland, who was one of the few cities that had 3 professional sports teams, to no longer have any. As a Oakland native, that would hurt my heart to not for them not to have any professional sports teams. But at the same time, it just seems to me that Vegas makes a ton of sense for both the A's and Major League Baseball. It seems to me that it's just a matter of if, not when, at this point. But I appreciate the fact that they continue to give Oakland chance after chance to try to get their stuff together to make it happen. But now that for after many years away, having boots on the ground here, it's not going to happen. There are too many hurdles and obstacles in the way for making a ballpark happen here.
Okay, but how much of this is, and maybe it's not any, because I don't follow the story, but how much of this possibly is, Lou Wolf, you're a terribly rich human, you're a cheap ass owner, and the team sucks. So why do we want to bend over backwards in this scenario when you are not guaranteeing that you're going to put a product out there that is going to make the city proud?
That is, that's a perfectly great. That's a great question, because clearly right now he is perfectly willing to just, bank his revenue sharing money and, spend right at the minimum and, just run a profitable business, and to hell with the fans in the city and the soul sucking, the morale sucking. This is Oakland. It's a great fan base. We have showed up for both the Warriors and the A's during times when the cupboard was bare. Both, people would come out. There was a strong core of fans that would come out and support the team, even when it was bad. But this, over the last several years, is just, I mean, it's awful. It's awful, the product that they put out there and expecting people to come out there. And the stadium stinks. It's a horrible fan experience at the Coliseum at this point.
They got to knock that thing down, man.
I mean, but rightfully, I mean, it's what, 66 is when it was built, and then the last remodel was that horrible Mount Davis debacle, which, hell, now that's 30 years old. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's time to put that whole complex needs to be shot. And I don't see, it's not a major league situation anymore. It's just not. So yeah,
there you go. There's your A's talk. Pitchers and catchers report in like 3 or 4 days. So that's shout out. I don't root against I'm not an A's fan, but I just like to see Bay Area teams do well, even when the Raiders, like, perennial, like 8-8, 7-9, like, oh, they won 10 games and make the playoffs. You know how many of my friends are so happy just at the thought of a Raiders team making the playoffs? Like their entire year lights up. I'm all for the Bay Area teams being good. So that's all. That's kind of there. Okay. So any last things about this game that you noticed or that you thought, this is something the Niners are going to have to keep an eye on? I mean, I just look at the RPO and I go, I don't understand how anyone stops it. And then when Jalen Hurts lines up in shotgun, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm even more scared because this dude is either going to quarterback draw or they're going to run some play action. He's going to roll out and the defense is going to run around like their hair's on fire. Like that, I don't know why that offense scares me the most, even though, like I said, I thought the way that Pat Mahomes chopped us up early in the season is probably the best team that we faced. But man, just where are we going here? Any trends that you saw in this game where you think
that is you hit on it? The RPO is here to stay. And what I don't know if people who don't watch a lot of Kansas City football, it stylistically it might not look the same, but what the Eagles and the Chiefs do is a lot of the same things. Mahomes has all of that RPO stuff at his disposal. He just chooses the option that he chooses most often is to pass the ball.
Yeah.
But that run game option is definitely there for him. And as we saw, as Robert says, that that quarterback scramble is going to haunt Eagles fans all off season, at least.
Yeah.
That was a huge play in the game. And like you say, that is something that is going to be here to stay. I don't, as we talk about the Niners later on, I'll talk a little bit about our quarterback situation, but in this offense, that quarterback run component would be just so deadly. The other thing that was my big takeaway, an overall takeaway from this game, was that when you look at the NFL Hall of Fame monitor, 5 years in, Pat Mahomes is already a top 25 quarterback in NFL history right now, today. Yep. That is so, 3 weeks ago, we're talking, get up. Who's better? Is Joe Burrow the best quarterback in the end? Man, look, ain't nobody playing the game right now. Pat Mahomes is playing against history at this point. Nobody else, we're not talking about Joe Burrow or anybody else that's playing right now as top 25 ever right now. But that dude is in that conversation. If you go to Pro Football Reference and go to the Hall of Fame monitor and check out where he is and where he ranks historically right now at year 5. He's got, like, at the end of the day today, he added 4.5 points with another championship and another Super Bowl MVP, which puts him over 90 points on their metric. There's no player with 90 points and 2 championships that's not already in the Hall of Fame. I mean, there's players like Roethlisberger who will be, and Rodgers who will be. But you look historically, man, that dude's already a historically great player right now. And that, I think that is fascinating at 5 years in. I mean, it's in my lifetime unprecedented. There's nobody that's been this good this fast ever. So that is I feel privileged to be what I mean. I know we saw with LeBron this week, the culmination of, breaking Kareem's record is, that's something that, that's something that my uncle who introduced me to basketball, Kareem was his guy.
Yeah.
So even up until he passed, Jordan, LeBron, whatever, Kareem was still his guy as the greatest. And when the argument is there, Kareem is right there. I mean, you can make a really good argument that he's the greatest. So if you don't want to say professional basketball, he's definitely the greatest basketball player of all time. When you combine college and pro, I mean, Kareem was, I don't know, with some of our younger audiences, there was a time in this world where freshmen couldn't play college basketball. And he went to UCLA at a time when they were in the midst of a historic run of NCAA championship and undefeated basketball. His freshman team routinely kicked the varsity's national championship ass. That his freshman team was beating the national champions. So it just to put that in context, he is again one of the 3 best players ever to play. We've seen. I've been fortunate enough to witness all of LeBron's career.
Yep.
And to see him ascend into that conversation year after year, watching, the ups and downs, the 2011 struggles. I mean, it's been, to see the totality of a career, to see somebody grow into one of the greatest basketball players of all time. It's been a real treat to see that. And Pat Mahomes is, I believe, one of those guys that we're witnessing. We're witnessing a Hall of Fame career bloom right in front of our faces. And we saw another step in that journey today. And I feel it's a pleasure to watch.
So, you mentioned the quarterback situation. Let's just talk about that 49ers right now. And by the way, I thought, with the exception of the fumble, I thought Jalen Hurts played awesome.
Yeah.
He was calm and cool and collected. The one bad play that I'm sure that's going to be the play that is getting him up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get better. And that's just the way it works, but
just a little too loose with that ball. And yeah. I mean, it's just those little details. But like you say, that's the kind of thing that's fixable. You can coach that. And like you say, that's the type of thing that when you're in high school, you walk around all off season with that ball tucked high and tight. And
Coach Boone trying to slap it out of your hand.
Yeah, exactly. So those little things as a young quarterback, which he still is, but was talking about that earlier this week. I'm not this all or nothing guy. Just championship or bust. I mean, this was a great season for him and something that definitely him and the Eagles can build on.
He was ready for that stage too.
Oh yeah, especially when you look back on his college career, where in the biggest moment prior to this, it didn't go as well as it could have. So, I mean, unlike his counterpart, that number 6 boy, remember the last time we saw him on a big stage, he had like 200 yards in the first half before he got hurt. The stage is not too big for him or AJ Brown, clearly. So I say that to say Jalen played well, and the Eagles. I mean, I think that they are, you know, the way Howie Roseman has built that squad out with a bunch of resources and a bunch of draft pick capital still, they're going to be a team that's going to be there to be reckoned with for many, many years. And as long as KC has number 13,
Oh,
they're going to
yeah.
be in the mix. So
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about our own guy. Brock Purdy is injured. When we talked last, we did not know what the extent of that injury was going to be, and I did a sort of a follow-up short podcast when I sort of realized what it was, which was the UCL. And the reason why I know the UCL injury a lot is because of baseball and these. But what in the reading I learned, I was like, okay, reconstruction, which is the Tommy John surgery, versus repair, and that's kind of what we were looking at. Which one is it? And it sounds like it is not the reconstruction, and that it is the repair. And Brock finished third in the voting for Rookie of the Year, and he was interviewed, and he said that he's going to undergo surgery in 2 weeks, and this was a couple days ago. I believe the date is the 22nd. And he said he's not going to have Tommy John surgery, so he should be able to start throwing in 3 months and be fully recovered come August. Now, when I was doing my research, it sounded like that's an early-ish date for him, because everything else I was reading sounded like it was going to be more towards the end of training camp and closer to the beginning of the season. But he says August. So, I mean, that's going to be a date that everyone is going to sort of look at to see if he can actually be back by then. And the reason why this date is important is because Trey is going to be leading all the OTAs. And then if he's leading most of the training camp as well, then Kyle's got a decision. Do we go with the guy, especially if Trey's playing well, do we go with the guy who's been leading this team all training camp? Or do we go with the guy who led us last year, even though he hasn't been able to play much in training camp and in the preseason? So that's why that date is important. And that's going to be kind of the bullseye. I think all 49er fans are going to bullseye that August timeframe because that's going to be, a big part of the early season.
Well, I saw something today where Brock was talking, and apparently there is a third option out there that is more kind of a hybrid between the repair
Interesting.
and the reconstruction, which was basically that you would do the repair with an internal brace that would give it more stability long term, which is the benefit of the Tommy John. Is if you reconstruct it, it's going to be you're less likely long term to have any recurring effects, as opposed to when you just repair it. It's still, I mean, it's damage. You've repaired the damage, but the damage is still there. But this hybrid repair with the internal brace gives you a lot of the benefits of the Tommy John without the long layoff. So if the surgeon gets in there and decides that that's the course of action to take, you're now talking about November as opposed to August. Which again, so apparently that's going to be an audible that Brock and his doctors and his team, that the surgeon is going to make, that he'll get in there and see what it is, what is the best course of action. So that's out there. So again, but that's what I've been saying all along, is that I know enough about my family. I've got a lot of baseball players in my family, and I've got a high school nephew who has gone under this procedure, and he got something similar to what the second option was the repair with the internal brace. And it's a a 9 to 12 month recovery and therapeutic time. And so he's a junior in high school. So they decided that whatever's going to strengthen it more long term, he's not going to pitch his junior year, period. So now, but for him, Major League Baseball is, obviously that's a far-fetched dream, but he really wants to pitch Division I.
Yeah.
So that for him, that's the best course of action. Just skip the junior year, try to come back strong for your senior year, and maybe go the JUCO route to try to get one. But it's a long-term prognosis and looking forward rather than trying to get back just as fast as you can. And I would think the same thing would be for Brock. He's 23 years old. He should be looking towards, I think, trying to do what is best for him long term, as opposed to just trying to rush back. I think. But I understand the competitor that he's got a legitimate competitor and he is in the driver's seat right now. So I could understand the sentiment of wanting to get back as quick as possible to hold on to and to solidify my spot, especially coming from where he's coming from. I get that. But my hope is that what is done for him, which is what I always feel for the player, is what's done for him is done with his long-term prognosis in mind and not what's necessarily in the best interest for me, in the best interest of the team, or what's in his best short-term interest. I think we should be looking long-term. I think about that because I was having a conversation earlier this week about Tua in his situation, and he's all in for coming back, and I'm glad for that. But I hope that there are people who are looking at his because I understand as a player for a lot of reasons why you want to get back out there.
Yeah.
But is that best long term for him? I hope there are people in his corner and people at the Dolphins who are looking out for his best interest
Absolutely.
as a person, not as just a football player and an asset to their organization. And I would hope the 49ers look at Brock the same way. What he did this year was phenomenal. And while I am 100% Team Trey, I want what's best for him because having that competition in the quarterback room is nothing but good for the team, I think, if it's handled properly. So, we'll see. And I've been saying this from the jump that I know enough about it from baseball that any prognosis or prognostication that we're making is just that until the surgeon gets in there and sees exactly what he's dealing with. The MRI is only going to tell you so much. He's going to know a whole lot more once he cracks it open and sees exactly what he's dealing with. And then once he's sewn back up and we start to see a healing, a physical therapy, that's when we're going to know what the timetable really is. So all of this we're doing right now is just conjecture. And I'm all for conjecture. I love conjecture. So it's gonna be great. But like you say, we've got another 10 days until we get the surgery. And we're talking about Valentine's Day. I think we'll be exactly 2 months away from the start of the off-season program. And in between now and then, Trey will be cleared. And it looks at this point, there's no question he's going to be quarterback one to start the off-season program. And it looks like all the way up, even if the early prognosis is right and it's August, he'll be quarterback one going into training camp and through the start of training camp, because August will be into training camp, if that is the date for Brock to come back. So he is going to get all the reps here, for the foreseeable future. And we'll see what that means. George says that it's Brock's job to lose. And it'll be interesting to see if that's the case, that it doesn't matter how well Trey plays.
Yeah.
If it just doesn't matter, that it's Brock's job regardless. That would be interesting. I know
That's
what I would.
Go
ahead.
That's what Joe Montana said, but then Joe Montana also said he thought they should bring back Jimmy. So I'm not sure
I think we should stop putting microphones in Joe Montana's face. Let's stop doing that, please. Thank you.
So the interesting thing about bringing in a backup though is, because in my mind I'm like, if they bring in Andy Dalton and something goes on with Purdy and he's not healthy, and maybe Trey's foot, like, as a fallback plan, Dalton might be just as good of a fallback plan as Jimmy was last year. But the problem with that is, best case scenario for the guy coming in, especially someone like Dalton who wants to start, is he's QB1 because these other guys are hurt or they're underperforming. Worst case scenario is those two guys battle it out and play well, and then Andy's not active on some of those weeks.
I don't see that a guy. I mean, I know. Well, number one, Andy Dalton had a hell of a career in Cincinnati. He was a really, really good football player. I don't know that he's that guy now.
I thought he was okay last year in some of the games that we watched.
I thought the Saints, he played well. I don't think, even if you could make the money work, like, I think you outlined the problem with a guy like Dalton or anyone of that ilk. I don't think they're going to come into a situation where it is more likely than not that they don't have a path to playing. I don't see why they would, with all the upheaval. There are as many as 11 jobs theoretically in the NFL this coming off season. And if I'm Andy Dalton, I feel like there aren't 11 quarterbacks in the league better than me. So why not go try to get in line in one of these other places where I've got a path to playing? Because like you say, if it goes, best case scenario for the 49ers is Brock is back healthy, Trey is healthy, whoever this third guy is. If Trey and Brock battle it out, whoever comes out on the short end of that stick is QB2. So if I'm Andy Dalton or Andy Dalton type guy, I'm QB3 and I'm in active. Best case scenario, I'm in active on a weekly basis. I just don't see it. I think the more likely option is they try to have a high priority draft pick that they have on the practice squad or something for, but I don't see an established quarterback coming in and just being, subjecting themselves to that kind of situation. I'm sure they'll be able to find somebody better than Josh Johnson to be 3. But I don't.
Are you telling me Lil Nicky Mullins is coming back to be 3rd
Hey,
string?
man, I know Kyle. I know Kyle has him on speed dial. Those are his kind of guys, man. And I'm sure they'll be looking in the draft for the next Brock Purdy or Nick Mullins.
Absolutely.
So maybe Stetson Bennett, Uncle Stetson, could come in and and on his path to being auto dealership mogul and governor of Atlanta could maybe be a 3rd string quarterback for the 49ers. He'll be a 3rd string quarterback for the Falcons before he'll be the 49ers, whatever.
All right, so D'Amico Ryans leaves to go be the head coach of the Houston Texans. So good for him. Glad to see him get that job, and it was very quick. He was a very wanted head coach there. And then he took Bobby Slowick to be the offensive coordinator. So the Niners lose two guys.
Congratulations, Bobby Millionaire. Good for you.
Yeah,
Good
man.
for you.
You know, I was having this conversation with Brad, who's a Rams fan, and I was saying how, you know, it's pretty amazing that Kyle has been able to repair that coaching staff and retool every year. And then those guys who get into these new positions, they're then promoted and leave for big jobs. So the Kyle, you know, I'm going to give him the most of the credit here. He's really got an eye for staff and for plugging into what he wants to do, which then becomes a trend in the NFL to do what the 49ers do. So when you have all these coaches who run this style, this trend of where football is, you got all these coaches who are under Kyle Shanahan, and then they go and do Kyle Shanahan like stuff on these other teams. So, because he was saying the same thing, you know, with the Rams and their coaching staff, how their guys are just getting plucked out as well, and you have to fulfill. But that's what the league is, and it's good to see those guys leave. But what'd you think about the addition of Wilkes as the defensive coordinator?
Well, obviously, that is a departure from the way we've done it the last two times, which is why I thought it would be somebody like Chris Harris, because that's just, you know, this is not, I don't believe that I know it all, but what I do is it's like comps or pattern recognition is what most, you know, things that people call intelligence is. It's just recognizing patterns. The last two times they got a hot position coach and promoted him. And so Chris Harris was the next hot position coach up to bat. And it just seemed like that was the natural fit. But apparently Wilkes interviewed well, and he is well respected as a defensive coordinator. You look back at, you know, the Cleveland experience didn't go very well, but he only had really three players. When I look back at it, you know, he had Garrett, Olivier, and Sheldon Richardson were really the only players that played above average by a PFF grading for that season of 2019. But if you look back to his 2017 Carolina defense, they were dogs, and they were a top 8 defense by a DVOA and went to a Super Bowl and had Kuechly. And so there's a lot that you could take from looking at the way that defense played that you can overlay to the talent that we have and see they played a ton of zone, which is kind of what we do. He blitzed a lot, which is heartening to me, because if we aren't getting home with 4, I always loved it when D'Amico would sooner rather than later apply pressure. You know, so if that's something that is in Wilkes' bag, I think that helps us as well. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good fit. And after we didn't get Fangio, I think that's the, you know, clearly they decided that was the best way to go. I mean, but let's just look at that for a minute. That the thought of having Fangio in the building with Kyle was something that really, really got me excited. Yeah, so yeah, but that's a good hire from McDaniel down there in Miami. So yeah, I'm glad. I think that, you know, overall, I mean, as much as we don't really know what happens, you know, in those meeting rooms, but it sounds like, you know, everybody around the league is excited that Steve Wilkes is coming. And I think we really just have to, at this point, like you opened up saying, Kyle has earned the benefit of the doubt when it comes to building out his coaching staff. I mean, at this point, whatever, you know, he's got carte blanche as far as I'm concerned. Whatever he says must be the right way to go, because he's done a very good job so far at that, in that aspect of, in a lot of aspects of the job. But that one in particular, he's done a really good job of identifying and developing talent.
And for Wilkes, obviously his goal is to be back as a head coach in the NFL and going the route of a team who that has been successful. And if he can keep that defense, because they have a lot of talent on that defense, and if he can keep that defense playing at a very high level this time next year, and there are head coaching opportunities available, he is creating, he is adding to his resume as well. So it's kind of a win-win in that way. But really, like, if you're a good team in the NFL, your coaching staff is not going to be the same year after year. If you're a bad team in the NFL, your coaching staff is not going to be the same year after year because you're getting rid of
either
guys.
way. You're just going to get rid of them.
So this is just something that is part of the normal in the NFL, and the Niners do a better job than most, I think, about sort of getting ahead of it and knowing and having an eye for who is next. We have to end this show. Maybe the swan song of the Jimmy G saga. He left. So, Matt Barrows is the beat writer that I pay attention to most. Matt Mayoko's also does a really good job. But those guys on the beat, they're sort of presenting, in reporting the information as they see it. They're not necessarily kind of digging in. And on the flip side, Tim Kawakami, as an analyst, he's kind of digging for stories sometimes. And he had Barrows and Dave Lombardi on his podcast very soon after the season ended. I think it was after the press conference to end the season. And Kyle was pretty testy in that press conference. He obviously does not like to lose, and he shows that emotion in his answers and his body language. And the question was laid out about why his quarterbacks get hurt. And, he just explained that it's really happenstance. Like, there's no pattern of injury here where, we're running guys and we're running plays that are getting these guys injured. This is his answer. I'm not excusing what he said. I'm just saying what his answer was. And he was clearly frustrated on this press conference. And so how this relates to Jimmy is that somebody asked him a question about Garoppolo, and he said there's no scenario where Garoppolo could return to the 49ers this offseason. Now, you and I just explained why that's not going to happen. Jimmy is not going to come in as QB3 and be inactive when there's so many other opportunities for him to go out there and battle for a number one spot. But
Jimmy's going to get a bag. Jimmy's going to get a bag this offseason. Watch. People think I'm crazy, but watch. Jimmy's going to get $30 or $40 million guaranteed. Watch. Trust me. It's going to happen.
So the question was sort of, why was Kyle so straightforward? Because he usually, whenever he talks about Jimmy, he's been hard on Jimmy in the past, but he likes to prop up Jimmy when he talks about him. And so Kawakami did some digging, and he said the relationship between Garoppolo and Shanahan Lynch seems to have gone a bit south in the days or weeks leading up to the NFC Championship game in Philadelphia. And I'll read the rest of his writing. He said, quote, "I don't know if there was a specific blow up or conversation that led to this. I don't know what the main issue was. We know that Garoppolo won a lot of games in his 6 seasons with the 49ers. It partially bailed him out this season by agreeing to come back after believing he was going to be traded or cut last season. If I was to make a knowledgeable guess, I'd say the mood was always a little questionable this season between Garoppolo and Shanahan. They've never been especially close, even when they were winning, but they worked very well together for long stretches over this period. The personality differences were part of why this worked." And because I listened to Tim, and I read everything Tim writes, I heard him also say that part of, and this may be part of Shanahan's frustration with Garoppolo, is that when the season ends, Garoppolo's like, phone turned off, can't really find him. He's in the off season, and he, and Kyle is a 24/7 football guy, right? Like he eats and drinks and sweats this stuff. So for Jimmy to just be like, peace out, see you guys when OTAs start or whatever, that may have been part of the frustration there. If I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, that could have been part of the frustration. But I figured, Jimmy has been the gift that keeps on giving for stuff like our chats when we were doing the Facebook group, even though they still have not brought me back. That's why we're on Discord, baby. We're moving on. And for stuff like this, for podcasts, like still, if I put Jimmy Garoppolo's name in a video on YouTube, like people are clicking on it. Like it's just what it is. So I just want to end with the swan song. We've had Jimmy for, we made that trade with New England. We bring him in. The season is essentially over when we bring him in, and he just starts ripping the ball, throwing for 300 yards. I think we beat Seattle, or we came really close to beating Seattle, and when Seattle was still Seattle. They beat the Titans in like a last-second game or something, and he came in, and we're like, oh, wow, we may have something. Now, there were moments where we kind of did have something, and then there were moments where we didn't really have something, and he was actually not a positive. But what is your kind of lasting memory of Garoppolo in his 49ers tenure?
Man, 5-0. And he parlayed that 5-0 to $125 million. And, if we're being honest, we won a lot of games with Jimmy. Yeah. I had people beat me over the head for 6 years. When I say Jimmy is just what do you think makes Jimmy such a great quarterback? The only answer 49er fans could ever give me was 40 and blah, blah, blah. It was never anything about his individual game. It was always about the wins. And look, let's be honest. I trust you. Am I being hyperbolic when I say that he never reached the heights of that 5-0 start ever again? He was never really that guy ever really consistently again. He missed 25 games in 6 years. I mean, that's to me, that's probably the biggest part of the Jimmy Garoppolo story. I mean, I guess you could point to some of his performances in the postseason, I guess. But I just think, he just was not healthy enough, more consistently enough, for that amount of money. I mean, you can't have that guy missing a quarter of the games that he's eligible to play. I mean, if he's your franchise quarterback, I mean, that's the best ability is availability. So that's what I will always remember. And it's it'll kind of always be what could have been with old Jimmy.
The way that I always answered that question, and when people would say, is he worth it, or I would just say, oh yeah, his best trait is that he's just handsome, and like people want to get behind him and follow him because he's like, he's got that like good looking dude confidence,
which is it's just, but that actually Garrett, that's kind of odd because that guy is normally like, how does that guy end up being the underdog guy? He's rich and handsome. Most people usually hate that guy.
But here's the thing. Guy. Here's the thing about, Kyle told the truth about Garoppolo in the playoffs when he wouldn't let him throw the football. And not to say that wasn't the best game plan. When they went to the Super Bowl, he did not really let this guy throw at all. He was playing. The 49ers playing so conservatively, and they were still winning games all the way to the Super Bowl. But the fact that he didn't let this guy really let it loose, I wonder if that also kind of hurt their relationship. Because if you're Jimmy and you're like, hey, man, I'm a quarterback, I can throw, and my coach is not letting me throw.
He's like, nah.
Like that can't make him happy, right? No quarterback likes being in that situation of just like, hey, let's run the ball 45 times in this game and win 14-0. So I think what Jimmy, I think Kyle was sort of trying to make sure that Jimmy didn't lose them games where Jimmy probably wanted opportunities to win games. And it was just, ultimately, I don't think Kyle ever trusted Jimmy in the way that Jimmy wanted to be trusted, or that felt that he should be trusted. And you could see that in the game plans, and you could see that in the not the results, but just drafting Trey, right? Like that was part of it. It's like, okay, like this is telling the truth on Jimmy. We are drafting someone who does all of the things that Jimmy can't do, especially torn ACL, where he became even more immobile after that. And we saw more of Jimmy getting rid of the ball faster than he needed to because he couldn't get out. He couldn't move up as well as he previously did in the past. So that was it. But ultimately, I think most fans will say that they were okay with the Jimmy experience. The more critical fans will probably say if Jimmy was a better version, we probably have a Super Bowl or two. And to have that, very few people get there. So that's a really high bar. The problem is he played for the 49ers, who had 5 Super Bowls, with 2 of the best quarterbacks of all time. So anytime a quarterback comes in here and doesn't deliver in those moments, you're always sort of like, well, it was okay, but he never won. And that's what we count as 49er fans is winning Super Bowls. And
I think you're right in that Kyle didn't trust him. And as a competitor, I'm sure that hurts Jimmy. But as fans, we have an expression, because me and you have talked about this so many times. It's the Jimmy ball.
Yeah.
And Jimmy can't pretend like that's not a thing. So I guess I'm saying what I said. I see both sides of it.
Yeah.
I can see where, as Jimmy, as a competitor, you want your coach to trust you. But I can also see, as if he's watching the same thing we're watching, I can understand why Kyle is like, what do you mean? Why am I not giving this the opportunity to throw the game away? Because Jimmy balls happen. So I'm trying to avoid that. So I understand that. And again, I get bashed over the head again because I love Brock. But what I want to do is but I understand fanatics don't want no voice of reason. They want everything to be all optimism. And just saying, look, is he more again, look, maybe I can admit that maybe I'm wrong, and maybe that it's more to Brock than he's more than just Jeremy Lin. Okay. I can say that maybe he is better than that. But I know you guys are crazy when you tell me he's Tom Brady or Kurt Warner or Joe Montana. I know. So the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah,
but he's way closer to what I think he is than what you guys think he is. That dude ain't no Hall of Famer. I'll bet whatever you want to bet today that he's not going to the Hall of Fame. So
okay, so let's end here. And this is an interesting and what you just said kind of reminded me of it. So Tim also said, and I forgot who he was talking to. He may have been talking to Ethan Strauss, actually. Ethan's podcast. And so Tim said that he would hear in the locker room that Kyle really, really liked Brock. But there was really no opportunity to just put him in because, Jimmy's playing and they're winning and there's no real, but he was just really trying to find a way for Brock to play. And he said the thing that impressed him most about Brock is when they were in their quarterback meetings, he would say something and then they would go to practice and Brock would do what he said. And then they would come back and Brock would tell him what he said and what Brock did on the field and sort of explained to Kyle. So in a sense, like, being the best student, and Kyle's probably not even realizing that's what he's doing, but he's like, he's comprehending what Kyle is coaching, putting it in action, and then coming back and explaining to Kyle how he did that and why, you know, why he comprehended it that way or whatever. So Kyle sees him as like this wide-eyed, bushy-tailed student who's just looking to improve, and Trey was not doing that necessarily. And I'm not saying Trey was expected to do that. I'm just saying that was the difference. So,
but then it was pretty. Oh, sorry, not to cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, so when the injury to Jimmy happens and Brock is playing in Miami, Tim said that they were kind of not excited that Jimmy got hurt, but excited to see if what their thought of about Brock and what they were seeing was actually true. And so then when he played well, it kind of made what they thought reality. So I think that's what they're happy about, which is they saw talent where maybe others didn't see talent, and he actually played. And if we're being honest, he trusted Brock way more than he trusted Jimmy on a lot of the things that they called. They were calling passes, you know, early in the first half where we're like, wait, we got McCaffrey. Like, why are we passing so much? And then it was like bing, bing, bing down the field and they would score. And it was like, yeah, like I trust this guy to make these decisions right off of the bat. And he didn't necessarily do the same with Jimmy. But that was the explanation I heard for why Kyle fell in love with Brock.
I don't know if you saw Trey on Rich Eisen, but it was interesting. His interview was interesting when he talked about the dynamic in the quarterback room as it related to Brock and Jimmy, and how actually when Brock took over, it was easier for him to become a bigger part and participate and help Brock with things like third down checks. And there were places where he felt like he could help Brock.
Yeah, he has more experience in his preparation. Yeah.
Whereas with Jimmy, it's really not much he could tell Jimmy because Jimmy's the vet, and you know, it was that dynamic. And it just seemed like what he intimated was it was a much more collegial quarterback room, whereas from the outside looking in, maybe you might think that him and Brock are competitors, but it really seems like they have a real good relationship.
Yeah, which is cool.
Kind of way different than like, you know, the opposite is like Steve and Joe, which clearly that was never a thing in terms of they really were. It was clear to me as a young person back then, but as I get older and read stuff, clearly those dudes were not trucking with each other at all. And Bill Walsh was really trying to get rid of Joe as early as 87.
He didn't think Joe was going to hold up?
No, well, no. It apparently back then I came across an article from back then where Bill was trying to trade Joe for 2 first-round picks and Billy Ray Smith to the Chargers. And that apparently that was a, you know, everybody denied it and blah, blah, blah. But apparently that was really a thing. And Eddie stopped that.
I'm sure Eddie D was like, if it was what are you doing, Bill, old man?
If it was up to Bill, he would have. But anybody who was here at the time knows Bill Walsh didn't have no sympathy for nobody. He was not. If his thing was always, and his book lays that out clearly. He was
the other thing about Bill,
a year earlier rather than a year too late.
Exactly, and that's the same as when Parcells was on his A game. That's the same thing. Also, the thing about Bill is he had to live up to this genius moniker. So of course you're going to win 2 Super Bowls with Joe Montana, and then you're going to bring in this Jerry Rice kid. Of course you're going to do that. So it's like, no, well, we're going to be ahead of the game. Joe's body isn't holding up. I'm going to take this USFL reject because I see greatness in him, and I am then going to turn him into the next best quarterback, and we are still going to win titles. Like, that is how Bill also thought, which shows you how competitive and how, you know, crazy and insane he was. Like, that's Like that's just the mind of this dude was constantly working. And
that whole thing is so fascinating to me. Everybody, Bill has kind of got this thing that Joe gets too much credit. Eddie D has got his little thing that Bill got too much credit. And Carmen Policy was the guy who was kind of the fixer that would go and soothe everybody's ego and kind of make everybody, you know, I think that was the thing looking back on the Jed Jim thing is there was no Parag is like the fixer, and that was just horrible because Jim, he hated him as much as he hated Jed, and so there really wasn't anybody to soothe anything.
But Harbaugh wasn't communicating with those guys in the way that, you know, they wanted to be communicated with. Harbaugh's like, hey, who are you guys? You guys are shirts, man. You guys are office, you know, office guys. I'm a blue shirt guy. I'm
never
doing
good
everything.
when your coach says that your owner is not man enough to be in these meetings with the team. That was
wrong. That's Jim. That's Jim's bad. You know who Joe still is frustrated with the most, though?
Who?
George Seifert.
Okay.
He said, now this is Joe's side. George Seifert shut Joe down in 1991, didn't let him play. Steve Young played the whole season. Joe got to play in the last game of the season. I think it's on Monday Night Football too.
Mm-hmm.
And they called a running play, which Joe audibled into a touchdown pass, and which upset the coaching staff. And Joe still has an icy relationship with George Seifert at 49er events.
Wow. That kind of stuff is always fascinating to me. That is, I had never heard that story.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's an article that went up last week. It was a long piece on Joe that ESPN put out. So you can, some of the stuff that I got it from there because it's fresh in my mind.
I didn't see that. I will definitely seek that out.
You know what? I will find it and I will throw it in the Discord for everyone to check out.
That'll be something that I dig into and we'll do some posting on during the off season, because that is, you know, I have that whole era of, you know, they 538 just came out with the greatest teams of blah blah blah. And that dynasty from, you know, our dynasty from, you know, 80 whatever to 90 whatever is the tops in all history of the NFL. And that, you know, that's like my era, you know, I was birthed into it.
Yeah.
During, you know, 82 was my first year. And so, you know, those are my teams. Those seminal teams are my teams. And all those stories about what was going on then, that, you know, things that I wouldn't necessarily comprehend as a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
Those things are infinitely fascinating to me now that I sit here now. So yeah, I'll definitely seek out that article, and I'm sure I'll have thoughts.
I will find it and I will pop it in there tonight.
Sounds good.
All right, we went over what I thought we were going to do, but it was nice to kind of connect that the way that we connected that. Though it's kind of interesting, we connected you know, Jimmy and Brock and Trey with Montana and Young, but everyone gets compared to Montana and Young in some way in this area.
It's inevitable.
All right, so thanks to everyone who checked in, who's watching and listening. Rod and I are going to try and get back every couple of weeks. You know, I don't know what the consistency of the schedule will be, but if you're part of the Discord, you will know. If you follow our socials, you will know. But we won't go weekly. We'll obviously do stuff for the draft, but I'm thinking every 2 weeks is probably pretty solid. We'll have enough news to do a full show. And look, if something happens and we want to come back sooner, we'll come back sooner.
Yeah.
So
sounds good.
All right. So for Rod, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.